What difficult questions should I ask my parent when I start this new caregiver journey? That way it makes it easier for mom and dad and me.
Yeah, today we've got some really tough questions today. We're dealing with all the tough spots, but I think that the questions to really ask is try to understand. It's a simple one is, if you can't care for yourself completely, how do you envision that happening? How do you think you'd want to go to an assisted living? Do you think you'd want to be in a nursing home? Do you think you want to have a caregiver to come in? I think when presented in that way, people are actually forced to think about the situation. If you instead start with, hey, I'm thinking about having a caregiver come in and start taking care of you. What do you want them to do? That's probably the wrong approach. I think you first got to help them understand that we're getting to the point where there's probably um, some intervention of some nature needed. And it could be also what people don't. No one wants to feel like they're making their parent feel like a burden. Like, um, but the fact is that it is a burden. It's a burden we all willingly bear and we're willing to take on. I think it's a sense of duty for many of us, but we can't lie to ourselves and act like it doesn't change anything. It changes everything when you have to care for a parent. It's just like it'd be the same as like saying I'm going to have a child and it's not going to change my life at all. It's completely different. And so I think that's important to be open about that, not to make anyone feel guilty, but just to be open about it. And that's sometimes I think that parents don't always recognize that this change in their life is going to mean a change in other people's lives as well. And we should all be willing to soften that as much as possible. I don't think that it doesn't, it's for whatever reason, it's a bit of a taboo discussion still here in America that we all have. We don't want to have that kind of discussion about, okay, mom, you need more help. I've got my life. This is going to interfere and change my life if I have to start helping you. No one's asking that we drop everything and suddenly go move in with mom. But I think it's important to have that discussion. But so really asking your mom, your dad, hey, um, have you thought about what would happen if you couldn't live at home safely on your own? And I think that's going to bring up a next question, which is, I'm fine. I don't need anyone. I am safe. And I think that's where you got to have that discussion. Well, let's talk about these scenarios. Maybe come up with some scenarios of how would we handle this situation? How would we handle that situation? What if those situations become chronic? For my own mom, it was more frequent trips to the doctor's office. Who's going to be there for helping with those things? And actually, this discussion is easier when you don't live in the same city. It's more difficult when you live in the same city, but it's just as much of a challenge in those situations as well. Um, but it's really a matter of like recognizing the things that are changing, maybe making a list of those things as you prepare to have this conversation. But also know that it's not one conversation; it's multiple conversations. The earlier you bring this stuff up, the better. We often mention that it's something that we tend to be thrust into this scenario because of a precipitating event. Mom just had a fall. Mom just got a diagnosis of some sort. Mom's had a sickness, and now things are recognizably different. But what we fail to recognize is that prior to that precipitating event, there were a lot of warning signs and a lot of things that we could have been thinking about, but we chose not to for whatever reasons. But now we're thrust into it because something has to change. So even though you might be clear that mom can no longer be on her own safely, don't approach it with, mom, you can't be on your own safely. Say, mom, if you thought about it, if you can't be at home safely, what would you want to do? Again, sense of control gives them a chance to participate in the conversation.
And
And
I
again,
find that your parent is this, when they're at that certain age, their friends and other family members are going through the same thing. So sometimes it's nice if you go, hey mom, do you know this just happened to Mary? Can you believe that? And then someone that's around the same age, and then just kind of enter the conversation that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's also important to remember, I think that we tend to, I was athletic at a younger age. I still think I can do things. I still think that if I want to get back in shape, I can do it really easily. But the fact is that age changes those things. I can't do that. But in my mind, I'm the same person I always was. Any outside observer sees massive changes in who I am. Um, we have to remember that we're no different in our own minds when we're 85. We think we're the same 50-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old. We might rationalize it, we might articulate it and say things like, oh, I know I'm not able to do these things anymore. But the reality is, we think we can always do more than we really can. And that's almost at every age in our life. It doesn't change when we're 80, 85, even 90. You know, we might not be able to show it as easily as we did before, but we still think we can do more than. So that's conversation is, you have to really remember that that's what's going on in the mind of the parent, is they think they can do much more than they really can. So you have to take an approach that helps people kind of get there, you know, and that's a challenge. And I like the idea of saying, hey, this just happened with Mary. She's got a caregiver that's coming in. They're doing these things for them. Something like that, approaching it. But again, soft approach is always the best early on, unless your parents approached you with this subject. It's always a tough one to bring up. But I think you've got to bring it up at some point, regardless of how much boat rocking you're going to do.